Hi, I'm Dana, and one of the big conversations that I've been seeing online, and that I've also actually had conversations about in real life now, is whether or not untraumatized autistic people actually exist. And it's something I've got a lot of thoughts on, it's something I have my own opinions and experiences with, and I want to talk about it and get your guys' opinions and create the discussion here, because a lot of the time when discussions about this kind of thing happen online, they're not very nice, and I don't like to be a part of them, so I'd like to have it here. I think the first thing to approach, and something that I've been doing like a lot of reading up on and talking about in therapy, is what counts as trauma. And I think it's a deeply personal thing that varies massively from person to person. I think that some of us can go through, events and experiences and not find them traumatic and just move on and go, yeah, that happened, that was a thing. And on the flip side, other people can go through that exact same experience and come out on the other end and be like, whoa, I'm fucked up, that was so traumatizing, that was horrible, So I think it is very much something that has to be looked at on a person-to-person basis. Every autistic person's different, every human being is different, and there's no difference there when it comes to autistic people, which means that all of us have different experiences, all of us will have different opinions. And I think that one of the tough things with trauma as well is that a lot of people who are traumatized and have experienced a lot of trauma will deny it. It's very easy to put yourself in a place and go, no, I haven't, that was actually fine. And there's definitely been some autistic people that I've known that claimed they were completely fine, mentally well, mentally healthy. And I'm like, oh, good for you, but no. Sometimes you can see the trauma in other people that they don't see in themselves. As always though, gonna keep this here video all about me. I think for me personally, from growing up as an undiagnosed autistic kid, I can't imagine a way for any autistic person, be they diagnosed or not as a child, I can't see a way of you getting through school without bullying. And I'm yet to see bullying that isn't somewhat traumatising, so I think that's the beginning of it all for a lot of us. The earliest memories I have of socialising and talking to people and trying to make friends of those attempts backfiring. There of people being kind of harsh and cruel and mean to me. And even then I'm like, they were kind of mean. And it's like, some of them were fucking horrible. I got really badly bullied throughout school. I changed primary schools alone 3 times. It was horrible, and it was definitely something that can be considered traumatizing. And yet I'm still very much like, they were mean to me. Because I think it's very easy to feel like you're being over dramatic and being a bit silly about it, because it is things that other people can go through and not be traumatized by and just get over and move on from. And my little autistic brain sticks with it and is like, no, we're going to remember that every night before you go to sleep. But outside of that, even for, even if you're fucking homeschooled, I think there's the issue of, we're generally not understood very well. And, I've spoken before about my family situation, but especially in childhood, I think that for myself and probably a lot of other autistic people, a lot of my needs were not met because for some parts of it were because we didn't know I was autistic, and some parts of it are just that it's difficult to have an autistic kid. It's difficult to meet any child, it's difficult to meet every need of any child. So obviously when you've got a kid that's got these additional needs or different needs to other kids, they're not getting met. And for me personally, I don't like to get into my childhood trauma on YouTube, but it is very much a case of, I don't know how to deal with any sort of emotion as an adult, because as a child, if we were emotional, we were just sent to our rooms, go and calm down. We had to just self-soothe and deal with it, but I didn't know how to self-soothe because no one else had soothed me. I'm autistic and I could have really just done with a hug. And even though being sent to your room because you're upset isn't in itself traumatizing, but being sat in your room as a child, absolutely howling and sobbing and wondering why no one's ever loved you, it's not great. That's going to leave an effect, isn't it? But what I'm trying to get to with that is that I don't think my parents were doing necessarily a bad thing by doing that. But as an adult who knows I'm autistic, I'm like, oh, that's not good for an autistic kid. We need this, this and this. And I'm no childhood expert. I'm no fucking parent. Maybe all kids need that. I don't know. And I'm still figuring a lot of things out. But yeah, my point here is that I needed to be comforted. I needed to be held. I needed to be told that it will all be okay. And I got sent to my room instead. A lot of my needs weren't necessarily what other kids needed, or maybe they were, my parents genuinely didn't give a fuck. But growing up and having a lot of your needs not met is going to lead to feeling a bit of trauma, you know? That's trauma. Having your needs not met as a child can cause trauma, can be trauma, can be a traumatic thing. I'm still in therapy for a reason, okay? But another big part of it for me is, I'm not sure how to word this could be a bit messy, I hope you keep up with me, but it's the vibe of like, I've had 101 situations that I've gone into thinking, okay, I'll do X, Y, Z. This is what needs to be done. This is what I need to say. This is how this social interaction is going to go. This is how this is going to go. You know, I've gone in with good intentions, with the expectation that it's all going to go well. And then it's just fallen apart around me. You know, everything's just gone to shit. And I'm like, okay, this is clearly a consequence of something I've done. But I have no idea which of the things I did has brought around this consequence. You know, like, I feel like most people can tell this action will bring around this consequence. Like in a social interaction or, you know, just general like friendships and relationships and whatever else. And I feel like that is completely out of my control. I don't feel like I have any idea what's going to happen when I've done or said something. So I automatically go for the worst possible scenario. And I automatically think it's going to be the worst possible scenario because of how many times that's happened. Like, I do think that we throw the term trauma around a lot now, and I'm still deeply uncomfortable with saying that I've found anything traumatic or that I have any sort of trauma, even though from my therapy sessions I clearly absolutely do. But, you know, I think it's very obvious to me that when you're going around the world, like in the world, and everything feels out of control, you know, I don't feel like I have control over any situation that I'm ever in. I don't feel like I control the vast majority of things that happen to me. You know, I've spent a long time without any friends and like not really talking to anyone because I don't feel like I can control any of the situations. I don't feel like I control where this conversation's going. I don't feel like I control the consequences that come from me saying something that I think is completely fine or doing something I think is completely fine and then finding out that it actually isn't. I've really fucked up. And, you know, as much as I can accept that those situations are my fault, it is my action that's brought around a consequence. It's still kind of traumatic to have to constantly be asking, like, what did I do? How do I stop this from happening again? I didn't even know it was going to happen this time, so how am I supposed to make sure it doesn't happen again? You know, I think that could very well be mostly my anxiety, but I think some degree of it is absolutely also having experienced the trauma of just feeling like I don't get to control anything and everything's just sort of happening to me, to a degree. I don't mean that with, like, all of life. Like, I've, you know, like, a lot of things in life I am like, you've just got to go on with it. But with social interactions and friendships and relationships, like I say, I don't feel like I'm in any way in control. And there's just been 1,001 times that I've thought I'm doing something completely fine and like innocuous or whatever. And then there's been this huge blowout argument because I fucked up. And I had no fucking idea that I was about to fuck up. And that's traumatizing. That's actually horrible. You know, it just very much feels to me that living as an autistic person in a world that doesn't for the most part accommodate to us or understand us very well or really care to accommodate or understand us very well, there's gonna be a lot of small traumas throughout your life. And I think that for me that's very much what it is. Like, I don't feel like I've had like any like huge trauma happen to me. You know, there's been a few big things in my life where I'm like, well, that was trauma, but none of it felt like valid until I started therapy for one. I was like, it's not like trauma, it was just a bad thing that happened. And it's therapy that has led me to be like, you know, that was a traumatic thing, that was some trauma there. But, you know, for myself, and I think most autistic people, if you hopefully, I'm not just generalising, I assume, I think that it is like this build-up of lots and lots of small little things, you know, similarly to when we have meltdowns and shutdowns. It's very rare that I have a meltdown or a shutdown over one thing. It will be like this one thing's just happened and now I'm upset, but it'll be the like 7 billion things that happened before that as well, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I think it's very similar with autistic trauma and like being an autistic person. We experience lots and lots and lots of minor traumas because, you know, like I say, I do think we throw the word trauma around a bit much, but, you know, every time that we've walked over to a group of people and had them walk away or just outright tell us that they don't want us there or whatever, that's trauma, that's traumatic, that's a horrible thing to have happen. And, you know, I hope I'm not the only one that's had that happen many a time. You know, and to be fair, I do think that the world's a pretty horrible place, you know? Like, I love, like, rolling green mountains and whatever else as much as the next gal, but for the most part, the world's pretty fucking horrible and hard. And, you know, it doesn't show as many kindnesses. So I think honestly most people are traumatized in some way just from being alive. Like if we're gonna consider trauma to be like bad things that have a lasting effect or whatever, I think that's most people in the world. Most of us have had at least like a handful of bad things that would lead us to have some like trauma issues from the trauma or whatever. But I think for autistic people especially, literally just living our lives and trying to get through it creates traumatized autistic people. You know, and I don't think that has to be the way. I don't think that we're like hardwired to be traumatized people. I think that there's every chance that the people that are currently raising children, you know, who have way more knowledge and education and everything and support and everything else than we have in the past, are most likely going to raise a generation of much less traumatized children. But the other side of that is that there's still a bunch of kids being forced into ABA and all sorts of other things that are going to be way more traumatized than I am when they grow up. You know, but from what I've seen of people on Twitter and Instagram and the like, I do think that there's some parents that are really going out of their way to make sure that at the very least, they're not going to traumatise their kids. The kids aren't going to be traumatised by their family or their home life, and their needs are going to be met. So I do think that in the future we are going to see untraumatised autistic people. But to be completely honest, I don't think they're about right now. You know, and you can argue with me. I'm not going to argue about how someone's fucking brain works. If you tell me you're not traumatised and you're autistic, I'm just going to be like, okay, good for you, I'm glad. Pay my therapy bills because they're mounting up. No, don't really. But, like, if you wanted to. But also get your own therapy if you think that. But also don't because you don't think you're traumatised, and I respect what you think of yourself. Yeah. I think we've approached the end of the video now, and I'm not entirely sure how helpful or opinionated this actually is. I think I really have just talked about myself a lot. But I don't think I really realised how much I'd struggled with things and how traumatic I do find a lot of life until I was in therapy and the like. And I know that a bunch of you guys can't afford therapy. So if I can share some of my epiphanies and some of my experiences, I feel like it might help some people out. You know, I could have done a video like this like 3, 4, 5 years ago. And that is the point of this channel. So as always, I'd love it if you left some comments down below with your opinions, with your experiences that you want to share, like whatever you want to say, I'm happy to read. Gosh, I'm a self-promoter YouTuber now, apparently, so you can find my links down below to my Ko-fi page if you wanted to buy me a coffee, donate me some money. I also have an Amazon wishlist down there, still not sure how that works, but I'm trying. It would be lovely if you wanted to like and subscribe as well, but for now, whoever you are, wherever you are, I hope you have a lovely morning, evening, day, afternoon, week, month, year, and I will see you again in a couple of days.